Whence the Whisper Comes. Chapter 3. What Children Know. The morning came slow, dragging light like an unwilling corpse over the treetops. I hadn't slept well. Dreams had twisted in my head like barbed wire, but the lights I'd seen last night hadn't left my thoughts. Coffee at the Eldermire Inn tasted like scorched dirt. Still, it was hot, and the warmth did enough to scrape the worst of my fog from my mind. I drained the cup, grabbed my coat, and set out. The woods behind the motel had looked peaceful enough from my window, tall, swaying pines tangled with bare-limbed oaks, their trunks silvered by dew, but up close, the peace peeled away. The trees pressed close, tight as conspirators, and the morning air carried the coppery tang of decay. I didn't have far to go. By the time I'd reached the clearing, I wasn't alone. Yellow police tape hung in lazy loops between the trunks, fluttering in a breeze that didn't quite exist. A pair of county deputies stood just inside the cordon, boots planted firm in the churned-up earth. One of them, broad-shouldered, young, eyes like glass, watched me approach without much interest. "You lost?" he asked, voice flat. I flashed my license. Private detective, name's Gideon Wells, looking into the Caldwell case. The deputy shared a glance with his partner, a thinner man with a patchy mustache and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "This ain't related to that, just an animal far as we can tell." I stepped closer, ducking under the tape. "Do you usually tape off your coyote kills?" The first one frowned. "We're just being cautious, local spook easy." "Right," I said, crouching beside what was left of the carcass. It was hard to tell what animal it had been, maybe a deer, maybe something else. What was clear was the violence. The flesh had been torn with something sharp. Too clean for teeth, too random for a hunter. "You got a lot of big predators in these woods?" I asked. "Bears, cougars sometimes," the second deputy said with a shrug. "Nature's nasty." I rose slowly. So's the truth. There was silence. The first deputy shifted on his feet, then spoke again. "Look, you're welcome to stick around if you think it'll help you find that little girl. We've got nothing to hide." It was an odd thing to say. I gave them a nod and wandered deeper into the clearing, eyes scanning the undergrowth. Something tugged at me, a sense of wrongness that had nothing to do with blood or viscera. Half hidden among the brambles stood an effigy, twigs and bones bound together in crude symmetry, dangling from a tree limb by braided cord. It turned slightly in the breeze, casting crooked shadows over the forest floor. I stared at it a long time, but it didn't mean anything. Not yet. But it would. I circled back to the corpse after finding the effigy. It hadn't moved, but somehow it looked worse in the full light of morning, like the woods had sunk their claws into it overnight, feeding off of what little life remained. The limbs were twisted, the ribcage peeled back like an obscene flower blooming too late in the season. But something about it didn't sit right, not just the violence. I crouched low again, frowning. "Where's the blood?" I muttered. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I scanned the ground, no puddle, no spray, not even the dark, sticky smear you'd expect beneath something this thoroughly mangled. The leaves were dry, undisturbed. The soil wasn't even damp. An animal torn apart like this should have painted the forest red. "Well, I'll be damned," said the young officer behind me. "How'd we miss that?" "You tell me," I said, standing slowly. "You're the professionals, aren't you?" He scratched the back of his neck, suddenly uncertain. His partner said nothing, just stared at the corpse with a new wariness, as though it might sit up and speak. I reached into my coat and pulled out the photograph Margaret Caldwell had given me, the one with Lily smiling softly in front of that rosebush, Rabbit clutched tightly in her arms. "This is Lily," I said. "Take a good look at that stuffed animal." The younger officer stepped closer, eyes narrowing as I pointed. "See the stitching? Right ear. Now, in her bedroom, same toy, same rabbit, but the stitches are on the left." The officer's brow furrowed. Maybe the photo was reversed. It wasn't. The older cop snorted. "You think someone swapped out her toy?" "I think someone went through the trouble of replacing a child's comfort item with a near-identical replica, and that someone either knew Lily well enough to mimic it, or didn't know her well enough to get it exactly right." They exchanged glances, uneasy but unconvinced. Could be she just had more than one, the older one said. Parents buy backups. Kids lose things. I slipped the photo back into my coat. And do they stitch each one by hand when they do? No answer. Just the sound of the wind stirring the branches. You boys ever see anything like this before? I asked, jerking my chin toward the effigy swinging lazily from its branch. The younger deputy looked away. The older one offered a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Small towns get bored. Maybe it's a prank. Teenagers. You know how they are. I do, I said, and I know when someone's feeding me a line. That smile never faltered. You're welcome to keep looking, Mr. Wells. Might be we could use the help. You got a sharp eye. If you turn anything up, let us know. It wasn't encouragement. It was an invitation. And that just made my skin crawl. Just don't stray too far, the younger deputy added with an awkward chuckle. Some of these woods don't like strangers. I didn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the bloodless corpse and the silent, watching trees beyond. Something had bled the life out of that animal and taken the time to clean up after itself, and I had a feeling it wasn't done yet. I took one last look at the effigy before I left the clearing. It swung gently from its perch, creaking on its cord like a thing left behind by time, or by something worse. There was a shape to it, a design, but I couldn't yet place it. Too crude for art, too deliberate for nonsense. Whatever it wasn't meant for the likes of me. Back in the car, I lit a cigarette with shaking fingers and watched the smoke curl like a ghost in the morning light. Then I turned the key and pulled back onto the road, headed for the Carter residence. If Abigail was Lily's only real friend, she might be the only one left who'd seen something, and hadn't yet learned to lie well enough to hide it. The Carter house sat on the edge of town, a little more modern than the others, though that wasn't saying much. The porch had been painted in the last year or so, and the yard was better kept, but it still wore the same haunted stillness as the rest of Eldermire, like the house itself was waiting for something. Mr. Carter answered the door, a stocky man with a lumberjack's shoulders and a furrow permanently etched between his brows. His wife, a thin woman with pinched features and tired eyes, appeared behind him almost immediately. "Can we help you?" she asked, a voice cautious but polite. I introduced myself, flashing the same license they'd probably seen in newspapers last year after the Hollywood case. "Just hoping to ask your daughter a few questions about her friend, Lily Caldwell." Mr. Carter glanced at his wife, who nodded faintly. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. "Please, come in." The house smelled like lemon polish and old paper, the kind of scent that tries to mask something but never quite does. As they led me through the hallway, something caught my eye, a pale shape hanging on the wall above a small table cluttered with school papers and keys. A porcelain mask. White, smooth, hollow eyes, strange curling markings etched just around the temples, similar to the one I'd seen back at the inn. "Your daughter make that?" I asked. Mrs. Carter turned back, following my gaze. "Yes, she did. From school, some sort of community art project, I think. They were all supposed to make something about tradition." My brows creased. What kind of tradition? She hesitated, then smiled uncertainly. "I don't remember. You know how children are. She was very proud of it." I stared at the mask a moment longer. It was perfectly symmetrical, like a face designed without emotion, or perhaps without a soul. They led me into a modest sitting room, faded floral upholstery, a cross on the wall, a ticking clock that seemed just a little too loud. "I'll get Abigail," Mrs. Carter said, disappearing down the hallway. Mr. Carter sat across from me in a chair that didn't quite fit his frame. He rubbed his hands together slowly, not speaking. Moments later, Mrs. Carter returned with a small girl trailing behind her, pale, with mousy brown hair and big, intelligent eyes that watched everything. "This is Abigail," she said gently. "Mr. Wells is asking questions about Lily." The girl nodded, sitting down on the edge of the couch, small hands clasped tightly in her lap. I gave her a moment to settle, and spoke gently. "Abigail, I know this is hard. I just want to ask you a few questions, and I'll be on my way. Is that all right?" She nodded, no words yet. "Lily's been missing for a few days. I understand you two were close." "We played sometimes," she said softly, barely above a whisper. "Did you see her the day she disappeared?" Abigail hesitated. "No. She was supposed to come over, but she didn't." I leaned in slightly. "Have you noticed anything strange lately? Anyone watching the house? People you don't recognize?" Her eyes flickered toward her parents, then back to me. "No," she said again. "Nothing like that." Her voice was steady, but her eyes said something different, something darker. I'd seen that look before, in kids who'd lived through more than they could name. It was the look of someone who knew a secret, and had been told to keep it. Whatever Abigail Carter wasn't saying, it was clawing at the back of her throat, begging to be let out. But someone was holding it in. Abigail's silence didn't surprise me. Whatever she knew, it wasn't something she was willing or able to say in front of her parents. The way her hands twisted in her lap, the slight tremble in her lower lip, the way she glanced toward her mother after every answer. She was carrying something, carefully and quietly. I needed a way to speak to her without words. I shifted in my seat, letting my voice soften. "Say, Abigail, you know how to make a paper airplane?" She looked up at me, just a flick of her eyes, cautious, then a small nod. "I used to make them all the time when I was your age," I said, leaning back with a faint smile. "My favorite part was watching how far they'd go, like they carried secrets on the wind." She blinked once, her lips twitching, maybe toward a smile, maybe not, but something changed behind her eyes, just a flicker of the light in the shadows. I rose slowly, brushing invisible lint from my coat. "Well," I said to Mr. and Mrs. Carter, "I appreciate your time." They both stood, the father offering a perfunctory handshake, the mother escorting me back to the front door. At the threshold, I paused and looked back, not at them, but at Abigail. "I know how sometimes details like to fly right out the windows of our mind," I said, letting the words hang gently in the air. "But if anything drifts back in, you can reach me at the inn." Abigail didn't move, but her eyes met mine, and that was enough. I stepped out into the cool air and closed the door behind me. Didn't go far. There was an alley beside the house where the hedges thinned out and the back porch sagged under years of rain and quiet. I found a spot behind the fence, out of view but with a clean line to her bedroom window. And then I waited. 5 minutes, 10. Then, like a whisper on the breeze, it came, drifting down from the open window, catching a gust and gliding awkwardly into the backyard like a drunk bird. A paper airplane. I waited until the coast was clear, then slipped over the fence and retrieved it. The folds were crisp and careful, a child's handiwork, but practiced. Unfolding it slowly, I found the message inside, written in purple marker with uneven but legible letters. "Lily and I used to play in the fortress. We called it that. It's in the library. Look in the attic." Below the message was a rough sketch, a tall building with a peaked roof and a pointed tower. The kind of place that probably smelled like dust and forgotten stories. An arrow pointed straight up, not to the roof, but to the attic. The fortress. I folded the note again, slipping it carefully into my coat. So that's where the trail led me next, the Eldermire library. Somehow I wasn't surprised. Places like that always held more than just books, and I had a feeling Lily had left more than a few pages unturned. The Eldermire library sat like a mausoleum at the edge of town, tall, quiet, and stubbornly out of time. Its Gothic facade had once been proud, tall windows arched like cathedral spires and stone gargoyles perched along the rooftop, their features worn smooth by years of wind and rain. Now, ivy climbed up the mortar like veins, and the building exhaled dust with every shift of the breeze. I parked out front beneath the yellowed branches of a skeletal oak, the bare limbs scratching softly against the hood. The door creaked as I pushed it open, a long moan that echoed down the aisles like a warning. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and silence. Long rows of shelves towered like forgotten tombstones, and the light filtering through the tall windows was dim, filtered through grime and time. A woman sat behind the front desk, early 60s, hair in a tight bun, glasses perched on the tip of her nose like they were holding her face together. She looked up as I approached, eyes narrowing. "Help you with something?" Her voice was pitched and dry, like pages turning themselves. "Name's Wells. I'm working with the Caldwell family," I said smoothly, flashing my license just enough to catch the light. "I'm following up on a lead from Lily's friend. Said they used to play in the attic. Called it their fortress." The librarian's expression didn't change, but her hand twitched slightly against the counter. A long pause. She didn't blink. Finally, she reached under the desk and pulled out a ring of tarnished keys. She selected one with a shaking hand. "Stairs are in the back, third door on the right." I nodded once, then I took the key and made my way past the reading rooms and empty study tables. The farther back I went, the colder it got, like the building was trying to breathe me out. Dust thickened with every step. Somewhere in the distance, something creaked. A groan of old beams shifting, or maybe just a building remembering how to be afraid. The attic door resisted. I had to shoulder it once before the warped frame gave in with a reluctant crack. The stairwell beyond was narrow, steep, and smelled of mold and something older, something like rot. I climbed carefully, each step protesting beneath my weight. The attic was vast, wide and low-ceilinged, cluttered with old desks, broken chairs, and boxes whose labels had long since faded to gray. Shafts of light speared through a single round window at the far end, casting dusty halos on the floor. Then I saw it. The fort. A faded bedsheet draped over a ring of chairs and overturned boxes, drooping like a shroud. Toys and scraps of paper surrounded it like offerings at an altar. One corner of the sheet had been tugged slightly loose, revealing small handprints in chalk on the floor. I knelt slowly and reached for the edge, pulled it back, and nearly fell over. A face stared up at me, snarling, fanged, fur-covered. Mottled hair clung to rubbery skin, and eyes glared with wild and frozen madness. I flinched, heart lurching up into my throat. Then silence. I reached out, touched it. A mask. Just a cheap Halloween mask, matted and dusty. A werewolf or a goblin maybe, one of the sort you find in the dime store bins the day after Halloween. Someone had set it carefully just inside the fort, facing it outward, like a guard, or a warning. I pushed it aside and ducked beneath the sheet. The fort was simple. Pillows and scraps of fabric, a cracked flashlight, a plastic tiara. A secret world built by children trying to keep the darkness out. But the wall behind the fort told a different story. There, covered by the sheet, scrawled in thick crayon with uneven strokes, was a drawing, crude but unmistakable, a tall building with broken windows. A schoolhouse, I think? Next to it, a ring of stick figures holding hands, all dressed in black, and in the center of the circle, something. It wasn't a person or an animal, it was larger, sharper, horned, tentacled, maybe both. The shape was jagged, uncertain, drawn in swirls and spikes and shadows, but even in crayon, it radiated menace. I stared at it for a long time. A child's drawing, or a confession in code. Either way, it pointed to the old school. I stepped back into the center of the attic, heart still thudding faintly from the scare. The mask stared at me from where I'd left it, its rubber snout frozen mid-snarl. I exhaled slow and low. "I'm not sure what's going on in this town," I said quietly to no one. "But I'm going to find out." I picked up the mask and stared into its hollow eye sockets. Looks like I'll be paying the school a visit.
Street lights flicker in the haze tonight. Shadows like ghosts in the pale moonlight. Steps echo loud on cobblestone streets. The night has secrets it'll never repeat. Whispers of shadows black and deep. Truth is a promise it won't keep. The city breathes in secrets cold. A labyrinth of lies that's centuries old. Rain falls soft, it's a lover's sigh. The smoke twists up like a haunted cry. Windows hold souls Each swing is pain for the lost and numb. The air is heavy, thick with dread. Voices of the living mingle with the dead. Voices of